Several months ago, there was a meme that was making the rounds of Facebook and Instagram. Maybe you saw it. I did. It struck a chord with me, so much to the point that I want to share it with you today, and I want to talk about it. Here it is. Your triggers are your responsibility. It isn't the world's obligation to tiptoe around you. Man, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I like those kind of pithy sayings that kind of smack you across the face. You know, a lot of times we wish the world were like that they tiptoed around us and they were sensitive to all of our triggers and everything that might upset us. Now, if you've been in recovery for any amount of time, you've probably heard this idea of a trigger. To define a trigger, it's a situation, location, word or words, and people that remind you of past pain or current heartache. A trigger is something that can cause you to stumble, to return to that old hurt habit or hang up. Triggers present themselves in a lot of different ways. Depending on what you struggle with, your trigger can be extremely different than the person sitting next to you. Maybe if you struggle with alcohol, it's that bar that you drive past every day on your way home from work. That bar that you spent hours in and you had made a lot of friends in, you spent a lot of your time in. Maybe if you're a mom and you have a toddler that's just out of control, when they throw a fit, that could be a trigger for you. Maybe if you struggle with lust and it's a certain time of day, you know that if you're alone and you're near your computer at this time of day, you're likely to get online and do things you shouldn't. Maybe it is a relationship. Maybe it's a person that can trigger you. Maybe it's even something specifically a person might say, like your spouse, when you argue and they say this one word or this one phrase and it triggers you. Maybe it's just simply a time of the week, like a Friday night. You've been paid, the work week is over, you're exhausted, you need to blow off some steam, you want to go participate in some of those behaviors that you're trying to walk away from. Your triggers are your responsibility. The world is not going to avoid your triggers just for the sake of you. That means you're likely going to experience your triggers again. That means you should identify them and be prepared for when it happens. Principle 7 of CR says, reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will for my life and to gain the power to follow His will. We are trying to gain the power to follow God's will. Let's look at the first part of that principle. Reserve a daily time with God for self-examination. Once you are in recovery and you are trying to move past whatever hurt habit or hang up you struggle with, you need to examine that hurt habit or hang up. And you need to examine and understand what the trigger was or what might motivate you to go back to it. Only you are going to know your deepest thoughts and what is actually leading you to return to that old behavior. Principle 7 gives us the two tried and true staples to do this, to self-examine your motives: Bible reading and prayer. Philippians 4:8-9 says this, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Now, that's a really common verse. That's verse 8. I want to read verse 9. Verse 9 says, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, this is Paul talking to his audience, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. I want to put the emphasis there on practice. It doesn't happen overnight. Paul knows that. This list of things to think about and these attitudes to have don't happen overnight. We need to be practicing those things. Every time we come up against a trigger that hasn't been examined, that hasn't been prepared for, we slip back into our old way of thinking and we don't think about what is honorable, what is just, what is pure, what is praiseworthy, what is upright. We have to examine and prepare for our triggers. Triggers require guardrails. What is a guardrail, you say? Well, let's say your trigger is that bar on the corner that you just happen to drive by every night on the way home from work. A guardrail would be drive another way home. Or maybe your trigger is a certain person that texts you at 10 or 11 at night, and you know every time that they want to talk or chat at that time of night, it leads to something negative. Put a healthy boundary on that relationship. Maybe if you struggle with lust, you know that every time you're in that computer room or that office or wherever you're at, you know you're going to be tempted to look at something you shouldn't be looking at. Identify that, prepare for it, and replace it. Get rid of the computer. Or maybe you need software that lets other people see what you're looking at on that computer. Maybe you struggle with anger. Maybe you need to identify the source of that anger, whether it be a person or something that's said to you or a way a person treats you. And prepare for that to happen again, and prepare your response to it ahead of time. Know that when that trigger comes my way, instead of doing what I normally do, I'm going to do this. This is how you're going to put guardrails up around the triggers in your life. The world is not going to do this for you. What do we say in the Serenity Prayer? To accept things as they are, not as I would have them to be. A couple years ago, I was at the Celebrate Recovery National Summit, and Pastor Rick Warren was teaching. He recommended doing a daily heart check, and I want to recommend that to you as well. Every day in your quiet time, your journaling time, your daily inventory time, do a heart check. Go through the acronym. Are you hurting? Are you exhausted? Are you angry? Are you resentful? Or are you tense? Ask that to yourself and answer honestly. And if you answer yes to any of these, figure out why and resolve it, or you're going to be more susceptible to your triggers. I want to end today by reminding you that all of this is only possible because of our Savior, Jesus Christ. It is He who acts and wills in us according to His good purpose. Only with His help will we be able to make any progress in our recoveries. Your focus questions for this week are: 1, what are some triggers in your life that you haven't addressed and prepared for? And 2, what are some ways that you can respond to your triggers that are positive and not negative? Thank you so much for joining me this week, Forever Family. Every day we get one day closer to being back together and meeting again. I look forward to that day. Have a great week, and God bless.